I'd like to welcome everybody out today to our board meeting on January 7th, 2020, to start out the new year. This is our first meeting for this year. And the meeting is going to be broadcast live back here in the back. And if all comments that you want to make, you need to come up to the podium over here. But you need to get a card and fill it out that's on this back table to make comments. There will be no questions except from the RAC chairman on the presentations that we do today. At this time, I'd like to introduce the board members. We'll start on my left with Randy Dirth.
Randy Dirth, representing the Northeast region out of Vernal, Utah.
Wade Heaton from the Southern region.
Carl Hurst, Central region.
Evan Albrecht, Southeast region.
Byron Bateman, I'm on the Northern region.
Mike Fowlks, I'm the director for the Division of Wildlife.
Brett Selman, the Northern region.
Donnie Hunter, Southern region.
Justin, do you want to start with the RAC?
Justin Oliver, Northern region.
Dan Abeda, the Northeastern region.
Brock McMillan, Central region.
Kent Johnson, Southeast region.
Braden Richmond, Southern region.
We need an approval of the agenda. Has everybody looked at the agenda and good with it? And if so, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to approve the agenda.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes. Everybody got a copy of those and had a chance to review them and stuff, so on the minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve those minutes.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Kevin, do you have anything on the old business action log that is due today?
I don't have anything today.
Is there anybody from the fishing that could come up and talk about the one item that we do have? Drew, if you're available to.
Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Sorry I'm not wearing a tie.
You look good, Drew, so you're okay.
That's a lie, Byron.
But my question was, there's an item on the action log about looking into, like our blue ribbon fisheries and, where we restrict the way we angle on certain streams to flies and lures, that we would have an increase on the fees on those, and then just all the other places throughout the state would, be the same as far as.
Yes.
But those high end use restricted areas, look at, charging more like we do on deer and elk and everything else.
Yeah, we right now we're going through a statewide evaluation of all of our fisheries using all of the surveys that we've done. Most importantly, we're using that 2015 statewide angler survey, and what we're trying to do is evaluate what anglers want and then what opportunities are out there on the landscape for them to take part in what aspect of fishing they want to do. So how many fly fishers there are out there, and then what opportunities there are for them. How many anglers want restrictive regulations, and then how many opportunities there are for those kind of anglers. How many people want brook trout, brown trout, cutthroat trout. We're going to have that done by the time this fall rolls around, and we'll have recommendations that come out of that. This fall is our 2-year cycle for guidebook regulation changes, and so we're carrying all of those recommendations forward at that time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions of Drew while he's up here? Thanks, Drew.
You're welcome.
At this time, we'll turn the meeting over to Director Fowlks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Several things that we can bring up. As always, I'll be brief. From the habitat section, we've been working for a long time with the Red Creek Irrigation Company out in the basin to come to an agreement on water use out there that will benefit them and us with regard to our water rights, and that agreement's been signed, which is good news. Some other promising news is NRCS and our habitat section are working on extending the contract, the long-standing partnership that we've had with NRCS. We have a new state conservationist, Emily Fife. I've met with her. I'm really excited about what she wants to do and where we're going to head with this. I think it's going to be really good. That we haven't reached agreement yet, but we're closing in on some really good stuff. So that's coming down the pike. From aquatics, some good news on Kanab Ammersnail. They've been proposed. They hit the register yesterday for delisting, which is good news. That's been a long road for our folks in aquatics to get to the point where that's, and our ESMF folks upstairs to get that to the point of delisting. The other thing I'll mention too is ice fishing is hot. Get out and try it. The Fish Lake Perch Tournament is set for February 22nd, so if you can get down for that, that's always a good event. Lots of other things going on too, but the ice fishing is pretty good. Licensing, as many of you may know, limited entry turkey draw is done. People are having their credit cards hit and getting their notices. I got mine yesterday, so.
Successful?
Yeah. So, we have Midwinter Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies meetings this week in Monterey, California. Kevin's going and Randy, right, are going to go down. And we're the host state, so they'll be hosting the commissioner side of things, and I'll be hosting the director side of things. So, on the wildlife side, speak briefly about the emergency cougar opening that we did on the minerals after we had another sheep taken. We had one cougar checked in on that, and we have had no other further cougar depredation on those sheep down there, so that's promising. We're going to talk a lot today about predator management and deer populations, mule deer populations. Randy Larson's year-end study came out. It's got some really telling information in that. So that leads into several issues we're going to be dealing with the legislature this year. Not getting into any great detail, but there will be bills out there that are aimed at addressing some of those issues. We're always dealing with AIS funding at the legislature too, just to give you a heads up on that. But the deer population and predator management issue is at the forefront right now. I think what I'd like to do is give some time to Covey, if we could, and have him come up, and I think Kent's coming up with him as well. Talk about deer numbers and that research and what's going on.
That'd be fine. And we also have Brock McMillan here, which is one of our chairs in the Central Region, which was part of that team with Randy to help put all that information together. So fortunate to have you here, Brock, to help answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you, but I'll defer to Kent usually.
Yeah, I think last time Steve Sorensen did say Kent is the smartest guy in the agency. So, no, thanks, Director Fowlks, and appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. So what we'd like to do is break this up and just kind of give it in three parts. And one is, what is the state of deer looking back? So looking back on this last year, what happened with our mule deer populations, where are we at? Two, Ken will be talking a little bit about, as we did our winter monitoring this year, what we found and what that means. And then I'd like to talk again about, okay, so what can we do moving forward? So just starting with what is the state of deer and what happened. And I'm going to bring up a graph here, if it'll come up. This is super exciting and very confusing, so you're welcome. Is that up on everybody's monitors? Can you see that? I'm not the tech guy. We'll get it fixed, though. Good job. There. Is that coming up now? Okay. This might be a little bit hard to see, but what this does is every winter in December, we collar a lot of mule deer across the state. We color a lot of mule deer adults and a lot of mule deer fawns. And that allows us to see and understand. And when we do that, we take a lot of data too. And Ken will talk about some of the data and what that means. When we do that, that allows us to get, this is very, very crude. There's other data that will go into our population models. And this isn't the population model, and I want to stress that. What this is just what we call a lambda, or a population growth rate, right? And a population growth rate of 1 is stable. If you look at the graph along the y-axis, you have 1 in a red line across there. So a population growth rate of 1 is essentially no growth, right? We didn't lose any deer, we didn't gain any deer. Anything below that line is negative growth, right? So if you look at the graph across there, and I just wanted to make sure that we always strive to present honest, factual data. That's the goal of the division. We present where we're at and what it is. And right now, as you look across that line, we lost deer this last year. As we went through a climatic event with a severe drought, followed by, in some areas, a very severe winter, we lost deer. And there is no doubt as to the cause, right? We know that it was a climatic event. We know that it was just, they didn't put on the fat reserves they needed to make it through that type of winter. And so populations, we had high adult mortality and high fawn mortality. It wasn't completely bleak in every area across the state. There were some areas, the Paunsaugunt, the Pine Valley, and then some of the big core units in the central of the state had relatively neutral growth. So if you look at the Central Mountains, Manti, the Nebo, the Wasatch, some of those units we didn't fare as badly as we did on some of the other units in the north and across the state. But we did lose deer across the state. Some of the harsher units, the Chalk Creek, the Camas, we had a lambda there of 0.37, right? So negative growth rate down to losing. And again, remember, this is pretty crude until we can get the other things we need in here to model our populations. But we know that we lost deer statewide. Okay, any specific questions about this portion or the data? I feel like this is bleak. What I do want to say is that this mule deer population cycle based on climate, right? When we deal with our counterparts in Colorado, Wyoming, this is the same things. These are the same things that our counterparts are dealing with. I also want to make it clear that, from about 2010 up through mid-2000s, we grew a lot of deer, right? We grew, in our modeled population estimate through that time, we grew 100,000 deer across the state. And our hunters and folks, we really got used to that, and it was great. Times were good. And this is normal in mule deer populations. They go up, they peak, and then they go down and they valley. And there are some things that we can do to try to reduce the severity of that valley, and that's what I'll be talking about after Kent. So.
Okay, thanks. So I guess I'm just going to start off by just talking about the biology of deer. And basically what a deer does is it gets through winter with whatever it has on its back, and then it spends the spring and summer and early fall trying to put on as much fat as it can. And depending on moisture and spring precipitation, that influences the quality of food that it eats, and that influences how much fat it can put on. So what we saw in summer of 2018 was severe drought across the whole state. And what that resulted in is deer came into winter in very poor shape. Overall, the statewide average was, when we capture them in December, we use an ultrasound and some palpation methods to assess overall health. And those data showed an average of 7.7% body fat across the whole state. And that would obviously be higher up north and lower down south. But that was the lowest we ever recorded. And what that resulted in, as Kobe just showed you, was poor survival in much of the state. And when we look at fawns, those fawns were also very light. Because the does weren't getting good nutrition, they weren't producing good milk, those fawns were also a lot lighter, and then we saw a lot of fawn mortality across the state. They came in at a little over 60 pounds, which is, again, really poor from what we're hoping to see. And so we lost a lot of deer. The good news with that hard winter is it puts a lot of snow on the mountains, a lot of good spring moisture, a lot of good vegetation. So when we went out and measured deer this year, we actually collared deer and measured them on 17 different units, 536 does across the state. So a huge effort getting a lot of data on this. And those percentages were up from 7.7 up to 9.5% across the state. Many units, Cache, Monroe, had the highest we ever saw. The Cache in particular went from 10% body fat up to 13.7. So a 3.7% difference in amount of fat they had entering winter, which should translate into very minimal loss due to malnutrition. And so basically what we see with these numbers is that deer are coming in healthy. Yeah, we lost a lot, but at least the ones that made it there are good and healthy, and we should see decent survival, or really good survival. Actually, last time we saw Cache numbers or even close to this high, we had 91% survival over winter. So should bode well for the population. From a fawn perspective, we also saw a lot heavier fawns. They gained an average of 5.5 pounds over what we saw last year. So so again, they're in good shape, and I guess the good news is malnutrition losses should not be a major issue. Even with hard winter, I think the adults can still make it through based on what we're seeing. You still would see that fawn loss, but we'll see exactly what the winter ends up. But I think it's at least a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for what we see with some of these deer herds. And I guess the one thing I didn't mention, I guess what this fat stuff, it basically just correlates to survival. The fatter the deer are, the better they're going to live. And it really is that simple.
And I've taken that strategy in my personal life as well. So.
Won't winter kill, that's for sure.
I should be fine. All right. So there's a lot of this that is out of our control, but there are a few things that we can do. And one is when we grew this many deer, right, through the habitat work and the climate that we enjoyed for that time, when we grew this many deer, we also grew a lot of predators, right? We have predators that are obligate carnivores that prefer deer, and they're going to track those deer populations. But when deer fall off, what we saw in the data is that we talk about whether take is additive or compensatory. And to simplify that, additive take hurts a population. And compensatory take, those animals would have died anyways. But when the deer populations become smaller, the number of predators on the landscape isn't automatically reduced. Okay, so those predators, they stay high. Their recruitment will slow, or can slow, because of they don't get as much nutrition as they had. But there's some data that shows that they can maintain those high predator loads for up to 8 years post drop-off. And what that will do is that under good times, we could still grow deer, but we wouldn't grow as quickly with that additional take on deer. And so through some of the research that we're doing, we're working to rewrite our predator management policy right now. And we can commit, we plan to bring that to the board this spring with big game recommendations, a new predator management policy that will allow us to adapt more quickly to these types of scenarios with the new data that we have, and manage units that are being impacted by predators differently than we would manage units that aren't. That's one good thing that we can do, right? There's a lot we can't do, but that's one thing we can do. Another thing we can do that we're trying to refocus our efforts on, as much as we've learned, and winter range is still very critical and very important. But we're learning the value of better summer range all the time. And at times, there are challenges working on summer range in our state, right? It can be difficult. But we are working to reprioritize and refocus and get more habitat work done on those crucial summer ranges to benefit mule deer as well. And those are the two major things that we can do. So with that, Kent and I will take any questions from the board.
Board have any questions?
With the change in the mandatory or the predatory predator management plan, when would we start taking more predators?
I'm less familiar with that cycle, but if it came through this spring, Darren, would that be able to be implemented? By next season, it would be implemented.
That would be in July, August for cougars, and then this time next year for bears.
Do you want to answer that, Darren?
I think if a unit requires predator management, we identify the predators or predator that's causing the downward pressure on the population, we'd implement a plan and then address all the necessary measures at that time. So we wouldn't necessarily need to wait till July, but people wouldn't start hunting until the season started. So that is a little bit maybe more vague than what you were saying, but yeah, we'd implement those immediately, but then hunting may be delayed.
Darren, one more question. Could we increase those numbers today on bears?
The board we can talk about that. The board obviously can do what they want. We did look at that this year when we did bear recommendations. I asked all the regions if they had any units. Remember, we adjusted permits last year, and given this, what we've seen with this data, I asked the regions if they had any units they felt like if they had another chance to increase permits, if they would, and we do have one recommended unit today that we're recommending that. We're not recommending any changes on any other units, but obviously we can talk about that today.
Thank you.
Kent, question for you, and I apologize for asking this kind of detail on the spot, but on some of these units where we really saw some high mortality last year, like in the cache, where the back fat was pretty high this fall, what were the fawn to doe ratios just in general?
Coming into this December,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't great. I don't know off the top of my head. I would guess low 60s. I don't know if somebody from the region has that data, but what we have seen, the cache weights are kind of interesting because we have seen a lot of fawn weights up. The cache weights were up slightly from last year, but they weren't up as much as you would necessarily expect given the good condition, and there appears to be a lag effect. So we actually were catching neonates on the cache this year, and one thing we noticed is that they were small, and it seemed like they just weren't getting that nutrition over winter in utero, and then you see that kind of carry over the rest of their life. So there certainly is still an effect of the hard winter going on there, but they are up, and so hopefully they'll still have decent survival. But it's 56. Is 48, I guess, is what Jim just said for fawn doe ratio. So,
thanks.
Fawn survival was 0% on the cache, on the colored fawns that you
all
had.
of our collars were lost. Yeah, obviously some made it through, but yeah, we can say that it was very bad. Yes.
One additional question, maybe not for you, Kent, but Mr. Chairman, you brought up the idea of what could we do with bear numbers today. I know this is a little outside of our agenda, but is there a possibility we could address lion numbers on an emergency basis, perhaps consider increasing some harvest objectives on some of the units that fill up? I don't know if this would be a director's order. I'm just thinking outside the box here for a quicker response.
We did that with the Mineral Mountains for sure, and we have to be on a case-by-case basis to do things like that, but certainly it's something we can talk about.
Questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll move on with our agenda. R657-33 Black Bear. Darren, if you want to go ahead and start that. Anybody that wants to make a comment, like I said earlier, you need to pick up one of those comment cards down there on the table, fill it out, and deliver that up here to and Staci. And like I mentioned earlier, also there are no questions, but just comments. There will be questions from the rack chairs and the Wildlife Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I appreciate the opportunity this morning to present some recommendations for black bear and cougar rules, and also some pursuit recommendations. Just briefly, in summary, last year, if everyone recalls, when we brought bear recommendations around, we recommended returning to the plan that requires a 3-year recommendation cycle, and that passed the board last year. So we made season and permit recommendations last year with the understanding that that would be for a 3-year cycle, and then we'd reevaluate at the end of the 3 years. We also promised the board that if we saw any kind of specific concerns on units in the state, that we would bring recommendations back during that cycle. And so we are going to do that today for one unit in the Plateau Boulder unit, and I'll show you that as we move on. In addition, we had some concerns raised at last year's board meeting that the board asked the division to address. Specifically, last year we recommended a rigging requirement in the rule that would have made it against the rule to rig a dog before legal hunting hours. And in addition to that, we had a few other concerns that have arisen in the southeastern part of the state that we wanted to address. So that's what we'll be talking about today. We won't be addressing other than the 1 unit permits and season dates today in our recommendation. Just a little bit of background on the concerns. In addition to the rigging rule, we've had for several years now, we've heard from land managers and regional law enforcement and biologists that in the spring on the LaSalle's, there are a lot of bear pursuers. So this would be for the pursuit season. There are also harvest tags that are available that time of year, but we're just talking about the pursuit. So pursuit is an opportunity for a person to use dogs to pursue a bear. Once the bear is treed, then the dogs are pulled and the bear is not killed. It's an opportunity for people to train dogs. It's similar to kind of a catch and release program for bears. Again, in the spring, it's a very popular unit, the LaSalle's especially. There are high bear densities on the LaSalle's. People really enjoy going there, and it allows people to see and pursue bears fairly regularly on that unit because of those densities. The concern is that with all of that interest and all of that activity, we're starting to see, according to the land management agencies and our folks, just some concerns about the numbers of people on the landscape, including things like resource damage, messes left in campgrounds, those sorts of things. So what we did, based on those concerns that were brought to us, we put together a discussion group last summer to talk with the stakeholders from that area down there and talk through the problem to try to come up with some solutions. Wrong computer. So the discussion group consisted of division personnel, including law enforcement and biologists from the southeastern region, myself. The Forest Service had 3 representatives on the group. State Institutional Trust Lands had 1 employee who they have some land down in that unit that they had similar concerns on. And we had 2 members of the Utah Houndsman Association presidency and board, and a couple of local or houndsmen that hunt the unit fairly regularly on the committee. In addition, we had 2 members of the board that participated in the committee. We met twice, talked through the issues, tried to identify what the concerns were and what the division could do to try to address some of those concerns. We narrowed things down to basically 3 issues. One is there's just too many people, too many pursuers on the landscape, and it was a people number problem. Secondarily, well, not secondarily, but part of that issue was identified as the number of non-residents. Utah in the spring is kind of the only game in town in the West for bear pursuit opportunities, and other states don't allow it, and so we do see a fair number of non-residents that can just buy a tag over the counter and then come and pursue bears on those units. It's close to Colorado, but we see people from all over the country coming in. The third issue was number of dogs or pack sizes, and so you can have several people in a row with trucks full of dogs and dogs in campgrounds that are there for a long time. And so those are the issues that the group identified, and then we tried to see if there was a way we could address them. One other issue, this is not something that the group that we formed addressed. This is something that was brought through our law enforcement section, is we felt like we needed to clarify some things in the rule to address some ethical and fair chase concerns, and that specifically is pursuing animals past the point of exhaustion, whether they lose any physical ability to escape their pursuers. The spirit of that, of avoiding that, is in the rule, but we're going to recommend some changes to the rule to just make that really clear what we mean about when you need to end a pursuit. So, moving on to recommendations. Because of the numbers of people that were identified as a concern, and specifically non-resident concerns, we currently have a system in the state that can address numbers of people, and that's by implementing restricted pursuit seasons. We do it in the summer already on the La Salles, the San Juan, and the Book Cliffs. And so what we're recommending is that we do this in the spring season as well, with 75 permits available on each unit. That's quite a bit more permits than are available during summer pursuit. Just as a reference, we see on average about 88 pursuers on the La Salles during that season now, just people who self-select to go there on average. It can be as low as the high 60s and as high as maybe 100. That includes non-residents, and so out of the 88 or odd, about 20 would be our non-residents currently who choose to go there. So we're recommending that out of the 75 permits, 10% of those permits be available to non-residents. So that would reduce non-resident numbers from 20 on the La Salles to 7. The other two units, the San Juan and the Book Cliffs, this is actually more permits than people are currently self-selecting to pursue on those units. We included the Book Cliffs. This is more of a San Juan and La Salles issue. We included the Book Cliffs just anticipating a shift. That's the third most popular unit in the state. We felt like restricting pursuit on those units would probably just shift pressure to the Book Cliffs, and so that's why we're including the Book Cliffs in the recommendation. Secondarily, to address the number of dogs, we're recommending that we limit the number of dogs that can be used to pursue or take a single bear or lion. We need to include lions in this because we don't want people saying, well, I'm chasing lions and not bears, and so we need to make sure that it's the same statewide. So to 16 statewide for all hunts and pursuits. And that for the summer pursuit and limited and restricted pursuit seasons, we maintain the cap at 8 dogs. That's what we currently do. We're not recommending changing that. We're just keeping that in place. And then finally, the hunting after hours issue, the rigging concern. We talked about that for quite a bit, but we felt like under the current rule that those after hour restrictions can be enforced given with the current rule. So we're not recommending any changes to rule to address that. We feel like we can enforce that. The fair chase and ethical concerns. We're recommending that we change the rule to clarify the point at which a person must end pursuit and release a bear or lion. So these would be changes to both the bear and lion rule. And the specific language is, a person may not pursue a single bear or lion in repeated pursuits to the point where it renders the animal physically unable to escape. And secondarily, a person must make reasonable efforts to call dogs off of a bear or lion that has been cornered or held at bay. Other actions we discussed in the group that don't pertain to that don't fall under our jurisdiction or enforcement capability. The Forest Service currently has a 16 dog per camp limit on the books. They haven't been enforcing that very rigorously, and they've committed to do that. That's part of their contribution to addressing the concern. In addition, they also have a 14-day camping limit, which they've also agreed to enforce. We committed to work with the Houndsman Association on an ethics course to share with bear hunters. We can make those materials available to them when they draw or purchase a permit that talks about things you should remember when you're in the backcountry to help preserve the sport in the state and to try not to come into conflict with other users. And finally, just kind of a bookkeeping thing, at the big game meetings you heard about, Parks has made some changes to their rule, which essentially changes their rule from not allowing hunting in state parks to allowing hunting in state parks unless they specifically prohibit it or close it. So we're making that change just to be consistent. This is the one unit permit change that we're recommending. We are recommending an increase in permits on the Plateau Boulder Caparowitz unit due to declining mule deer populations. We're recommending 5 additional permits for summer bait season, so that'd be a 17 total, and 30 additional spot and stock permits for the fall. Just as a point of reference, they see about 37% success on the summer bait season and about 10% success on the spot and stock fall season. So that can give you some idea of what we're talking about in terms of harvest. The reason that we're doing this, again, we asked statewide if there were units where people had some concerns and felt like they'd like to take a second look at the recommendations from last year. On the Boulder, we haven't increased permits there for several years. We did a slight increase last year, but within the parameters of the plan, we could have increased more. With some of the new data off the book cliffs on neonate predation by bears, of deer. So bears, we saw about a third of the neonatal, the brand new born fawn predation due to bears. Bears are keying in on those fawns when they hit the ground. We don't have that data for the Boulder. We are collaring animals down there, but we felt like addressing bear numbers down there could help with that population. That's why we're making that recommendation. Finally, this is we need to make one correction. This is something that still hasn't been corrected in your red line of the rule, and the RACs didn't hear this. But I mentioned it before. There's an 8-dog limit for both summer pursuit and restricted summer pursuit. And when we amended the rule, we left out the summer pursuit portion. So we didn't intend to change that. So we're just heads up, we need to amend the rule before. But today, if when you vote, we want to maintain that 8-dog limit as it currently is established. We'll just need to tweak the rule from the copy that you have. That's it. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
Darren, I've got a question. So according to the presentation, if I'm a resident or a non-resident, and I do not draw a pursuit tag for one of those 3 areas, I can still go somewhere else in the state and run my dogs. I just can't run them in those 3, correct?
Correct. So if you wanted to pursue on one of those 3 units, you'd need to draw a tag. If you drew a tag, you could still pursue statewide and the unit you drew. But if you wanted to buy just a permit over the counter, you couldn't hunt those 3 units.
I'm not limited to not going at all anymore. I just have to go maybe not to my favorite spot.
You could go somewhere else.
Darren, can you go to the slide that you talk about the 16 dog limit?
Is that it? One thing I should add to, just that Randy reminded me of, is if we do go to a limited entry pursuit season, that does come with waiting periods and bonus points just under the current system, and I think that'll be important to the discussion today. So just full disclosure, just so the board understands what that means.
So on the third item down, it says limit the number of dogs that can be used to pursue or take a single bear or lion to 16 statewide. And I just wanted to clarify that that is for the pursuit and for the hunting season.
Right. That's correct. That'd be a cap statewide for any time you're using dogs. That'd be the most you could turn loose at one time on a bear or lion.
Who's going to be able to apply for those pursuit permits?
It would be just like any other limited entry draw. So anybody, there'd be a non-resident pool, which would be 10%, and then residents would be capped.
It's not an outfitter, it's anyone.
Right. So
Anyone
under the
in that.
current rule, if you're an outfitter, you can guide a person who has a permit. So an outfitter that had a client that had a pursuit permit could still guide them without a permit, and of course they could put in as well. So, but the permits would go to the person who draws it. It wouldn't be something they could sell to someone else.
So a member of the family could
Right.
apply and draw one and then go.
Right.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the rack chairs? None? Okay, we'll take the reports of your rack meetings from the different chairs. We'll start with Braden Richmond on my left and continue over to Justin on the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a lot of discussion on this in the Southern RAC. As I understand, most of the RACs did with a lot of concern over our deer populations. So we had several motions that failed, which I'll quickly go through, and then we end up passing a motion. But we had a motion to allow year-round hunting on bears and cougars without limits on tags. That failed 3-5. We had another motion to open the summer season 1 week earlier and allow 2 weeks of overlap between the spring and summer seasons. That failed 4-5. And then we had another motion to accept the recommendations with the exception of only implementing limited entry spring for non-residents on LaSalle, San Juan, and Bookcliff units with tags based on 10% of the 3-year average for a total pursuit on the 3 units and pursuit to remain over-the-counter residents. And that failed for lack of a second. The motion that passed was to accept the proposal with the exception of limiting spring pursuit on the Bookcliff, San Juan, LaSalle. That was passed 7 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you. Kent?
Yeah, again, a lot of discussion on this. Our motion summary was, we had a motion to continue with residents being unlimited on those units. And that passed. We had a motion to restrict to not restrict the non-residents, but to force them into a mandatory online training course and surveys to be able to track how many of them there are there. That motion passed 8-5. And then there was a motion to accept the remainder of the DWR's recommendations.
That passed 12-1.
And that one passed 12-1, yes.
Thank you. Brock?
Thank you. We had a lot of discussion as well. In fact, our room, there was only standing room. It's the most attended meeting that I've ever been to. And We had a motion to oppose the restricted pursuit season and implement, but keep the 16-dog limit, and that passed unanimously. We had a motion to add an ethics portion to the current bear orientation course so that everybody had to take it. That passed unanimously as well. And then we had a motion to accept the remainder of the proposal as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, so we kind of broke this up into 3 or 4 different motions. The motion that was passed here on the restricted pursuit, there was a motion that passed for spring pursuit to be not restricted is what it was. So not going with the DWR proposal, with a caveat though that if the Wildlife Board did decide to implement a restricted pursuit, that the book cliffs be included in with the LaSalle's and the San Juans as well. That passed unanimously in the region. Let's see, so the additional tags there down south on the Boulder Comparawitz, that passed as well, 6-2 for the additional tags. The 16-dog limit, that passed as well, and then the remainder of the proposal passed our region. So,
thanks, Dan. Justin?
I was unable to attend our meeting that night, where I was at a funeral, but I understand there was a lot of very well attended and a lot of public input was there. Our first motion that was made was recommend that the Wildlife Board reject the proposal for the restricted spring bear pursuit, and that passed 5, 4, and 4 against, and there's 1 abstention. A motion was then made to recommend that the Wildlife Board accept the 16-dog pursuit limit portion of the rule, and that passed unanimously. Then there was a motion made to recommend that the Wildlife Board accept the remainder of the rule changes, and that motion passed 8, 4, and 1 against. And then there was also a motion made to recommend that the Wildlife Board not accept the bear tag increase on the Boulder Mountain and wait for a 3-year average, and that motion failed due to a lack of a second. And then I believe that was all of the motions. Oh, excuse me, one more. Then we recommend that the Wildlife Board accept the remainder of the black bear and cougar rule amendments as presented, and that passed unanimously. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll go to the public portion for comments only. Like I mentioned before, there's no questions. You're going to have 3 minutes. You're limited to 3 minutes. You'll see that on the monitors up here. At the end of that 3 minutes, up your comments and allow the next person in line to come up. Like I said, the comment cards are there on the table. If you haven't filled one out, now is your opportunity to do that. I've received several comment cards. We'll go in semi-order. I dropped them as I've got them here right now, and we'll start out with Jesse Painter, representing himself. Next will be Tyler Farr, and after Tyler Farr will be Sadie Young.
I'm just opposed to any changes or recommendations. We have a 3-year plan. Let's keep it. Thanks.
Hello. So I'm Tyler Farr. I'd like to just take a second here. So I'm a member of the Utah Houndsman Association. Been on the board for going on 6 years now. I've been a part of a lot of bear committee meetings that I've been invited by Darren and the division to attend. And when this past recommendations came out, the thing I have a problem with is in the past, we've always been told that there's been 0 complaints with houndsmen on the spring season. September 2018 I was there, I believe Byron was there, to the bear committee meeting. and we were told that there were 0 complaints with houndsmen in the spring season. 6 months later, I'm hunting on the LaSalle's. It was the second and last weekend of April, and I ran into the fish and game officer down there, Adam Wallerstein, and he begins to tell me that houndsmen are going to start to see a bunch of changes. And I was like, well, please tell me. I know nothing about it. And he starts to tell me about a big poaching incident that was down there the previous year before. And I'm sure a lot of you know about it. But my feeling is that all these changes to restrict houndsmen came from those one bad group of guys, and that it's pushed from the law enforcement side. I mean, I'm sure all of us would understand if in 2015 there was 20 complaints, 2016 there was 30. I mean, we would get it, but for years we were told there were 0 complaints with houndsmen pursuing bears in the spring. And so, and I feel like if it was a social issue, you wouldn't see the results that the RACs did, that nobody supported it. So I'd like to just leave that with you today. And also when Matt gets up to read the UHA's proposal, I support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Sadie, are you here? Okay, you want me just to read your comments? Sadie has down comments, no restricted pursuit. Next will be Chet Young. After Chet will be Jason Binder.
Chet Young, representing myself. I'm against the restricted pursuit. And it wasn't clear in there if there was going to be a 2-year waiting period if you did draw that, if it passed. It would be nice to have clarification on that, because that would mean we'd only be able to hunt every 3 years, even though there's supposed to be enough tags for everybody. But again, I'm against the restricted pursuit. Thanks.
Darren, can you clarify that waiting period? That wasn't mentioned before.
That's correct, yes. So I may not have gotten as much detail, but yeah, with limited entry hunt for bears, it includes a 2-year waiting period. What would probably happen in this instance with that many tags is that the unit may go undersubscribed. In that case, even if you're on a waiting period, you can still buy a permit over the counter when they go on sale. But yeah, it would include the waiting period.
Thank you.
My name's Jason Binder. I'm glad I could make it down here today. There's a couple of things that are pretty alarming that I see. We've already done summer limited pursuit. I've had the opportunity to draw 1 summer pursuit in 10 years. If we start limiting the non-residents in the spring, we're losing a lot of opportunity to train our dogs. You can't train dogs on the Wasatch unit or the Cash unit. The bears just aren't there like they are on the premium units. And those of us that have had hounds for 30 years as residents ought to be able to go hunt those premium units. It's not the residents that cause the problems. If we're trying to limit non-residents, then in the central rack, Marty got up and made the comment that we can limit non-residents without having to put the residents to a draw because it's a recreational activity. So I'm strongly against any restricted spring pursuit for us resident houndsmen. We need to be able to have the opportunity to get out there and run our dogs and hunt these units. My next concern would be the discussion of bear tag increases. Last year we had a substantial increase, and the Wildlife Board sat right here and voted that we would keep those numbers the same for 3 years, so we got actual data on what our bear populations are. As soon as the proclamation came out last year, there was an additional 30 premium tags issued in the proclamation that weren't voted on in this meeting. I spoke to Carl Hersey on February 22nd and brought it to his attention, and what happened is the conservation permits that are supposed to be taken out of the general pool were put back in the general pool, so we actually ended up issuing 30 extra premium tags last year that should not have been issued. And so I'd like the board to take a look at that and look and let's wait and see if we actually get any biological data that the bears are hurting our deer population. We have no data for that. Yes, lions get deer, but we have no proof. Bears sleep 6 to 7 months out of the year. They're not affecting our bear population as much as being portrayed. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jason. Margaret Pettis. After Margaret Pettis will be Brian Bittner. After Brine will be Ron Frank.
Good morning. I'm Margaret Pettis from Hiram. Hi, Byron. Nice to see you. The
Likewise, Margaret. Thank you.
man up there. Haven't seen you in a while. And Brett. I'd like to recommend that there be no bear hunt in the state of Utah. I'd like to recommend that there be no baiting, that there be no use of dogs to chase these very precious animals. Obviously, we're experiencing a real population press by humans coming in to do that from other states, which seems to be the real problem. We don't need to be everyone's recreation target because of our black bears. I live way up in the north. I'd love to be able to come upon a black bear in the back country, and I just feel that there's such pressure by dogs, more and more of a growing recreational sport in the state, that it's pushing back. Just the habitat needs aren't being met in these hard times for all wildlife in the state due to the drought and due to the increase of climate change and the increase of all sorts of influences upon wildlife. So I think it's time to step back and just see how things go without our intense pressure upon black bear. And baiting, as you know, I've come before this board many times. Baiting is just a repulsive, unsporting means of hunting an animal. It does not belong in any ethical manner of hunting of wildlife species. Pursuit, if you're going to train your dogs, well, train your dogs during, you don't need to be running an animal into exhaustion. And there are those who don't do that, I'm sure, but there are enough who do, and there isn't enough money to have enough enforcement people out in the field to be able to regulate that. And as long as that's a reality of budgeting, then there's no way to really know what's happening in the field. So thank you very much for listening to my recommendations, and good luck to you today.
Thanks, Margaret, for being exactly on time with 3 minutes. So.
I was going to put a clock right there.
I'm Brian Bittner. I'm a rancher my whole life. I'll represent myself and also Utah wool growers. I would say my situation where we have, we're up in Strawberry area, me and another neighbor. We have about 16 bears that have been taken because they kill a lot of livestock every year. If you add that with the number of permits and other neighbors, there's still a lot of bears. I'm concerned with that. Last year was basically a little lower than average because you had more feed. I suspect that I saw a tremendous decrease in the number of deer this last year up in that area. And, that could be due to lions, obviously, but also to bears. And the comment the man made about fat, is funny, but it's really accurate. If the more fat the animals have, the more they'll do. And so I suspect this year, you know, that they'll have more bear offspring just because they're in better condition. And I also think that drought over the years, have dramatic effects. During a drought, the predators increase a lot. That's what I've noticed in the past. You name it, they do really well. They get fat. Also, make a comment about lions. We have a ranch over by Park City. We used to have 5,000 deer in East Canyon, and we used to see 40-inch bucks all the time. I haven't seen one for years. And my dad used to sell 200 deer tags, and now this year I don't even think our family, we don't sell any tags. We didn't even get 10 deer this year. There's just no deer. And so, anyway, that's the only comment I have. I just think that they need to be, we've been managing predators on the increase and the deer on the decrease. Thank you.
Brian, those 16 bears, was that just this year, or?
That was this year.
My name's Ron Frank. I'm representing myself. I've been a houndsman for 30 years now, 30 plus years. My first recommendation would be everything that Margaret just said, throw it out the door. That's ridiculous. I don't want to recamp on everything that these guys have been saying. There was one thing that I'd like to add from Mr. DeBloois's thing where they was saying the houndsman was ruining the land and what was the other thing? Ruining the land and leaving dirty campsites. I go up in the mountains all the time, you know, and I hunt with a lot of different houndsmen and stuff. And I have never seen a dirty camp left by us. We don't ruin the land. I mean, I think we're more worried about our sport than anybody else, that we try to do things the right way. You have a fish and game officer down in the LaSalle's that is just flat out against houndsmen. Adam Wallenstein, I think's his name. He has harassed us, I mean, just nonstop. Pulls people over several times. He was looking for me this spring. He come over to the Book Cliffs looking for me and another hunter just to see what we was up to. I don't do anything wrong when I'm hunting. I work for the government. I have a secret clearance. I can't get in trouble. I can't have altercations with the law. I know there's been a lot of complaints about this fish and game officer down there, and it sounds like it's going to deaf ears. People have made complaints, made phone calls. They tell them, it's not worth the while. You're not a big enough organization, you know, we're just houndsmen. And something needs to be done. And I hope you guys I'm against all these recommendations about the pursuit, the restricted pursuit. I don't think we need that. I understand you guys is concerned down south for the out-of-state hunters and stuff. I realize there's a lot of them and something does need to do there. I got a lot of friends that are out-of-state hunters that come down here and hunt. But, you know, I'm looking out I want 30 more years of running dogs, and hell, the way it's sounding, you know, are we going to have this in 3 more years? That's all I got to say today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Next, we'll hear from Jamie Newsom, and Corey Huntsman will follow her, and Matt Farnsworth after Corey.
Hi, I'm Jamie Newman. I'm Vice President of the Eastern Idaho Houndsman Association and a former Utah resident. So as far as the bear stuff goes, I'm going to stick up for the residents and say that you shouldn't take their hunting opportunity away. A lot of these guys that live in these units, that's their backyard. They shouldn't have to put in to hunt in their backyard. As far as the non-residents go, I think a draw is fair. Or my friend Bill had a better idea of making it a premium tag that costs more money, because that'll eliminate some of your overcrowding problems where people that might only have a couple days to hunt aren't going to pay that premium price for the tag. So then you won't have so many people coming in. But More importantly, what I wanted to bring up is the whole collaring of the lions and bears, specifically on the cash unit. I don't know if any of you guys have ever gone to collar a lion or a bear before, but it's a lot of work, and it's expensive. It's wear and tear on our vehicles. It's just not as simple as darting the cat and putting a collar on it and sending it on its way. So we need to start protecting these collared animals, because the whole point of collaring them is to get information and study, and we can't do that if people are killing them within 2 weeks of us putting collars on them, which has happened twice now on the cache with our lions. So our bears, I think, are living because there's not a lot of bear tags on the cache, but that's important too. It's been harder for us to find bears, and I know Darren's catching a lot of heat from a lot of frustrated people on this subject, so just, we should address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Corey Huntsman, I'm on the Hound Association Board. I'd like to thank the chair and the board for your service, as well as this opportunity to have our voices heard. I was fortunate enough to be on the bear discussion group that was mentioned earlier. In this group, we were able to hear firsthand complaints and concerns from all affected parties. There were certainly some valid concerns. However, there were very few wildlife-related infractions. The majority were, like I said, was common sense, ethics, and crowding. I think something that would help the crowd, or the common sense and ethical concerns, would be to implement a mandatory online ethics course prior to purchasing a pursuit permit. As far as the crowding issues go, we feel a good first step would be to limit the non-residents to 2 spring bear pursuit permits for each of our 3 premium units, LaSalle, Bookcliffs, and San Juan. I joined the Hound Association Board last year, and there are several reasons why, but my main reason were my children. I want my kids and their kids to be able to enjoy the same hunting traditions that I've been blessed to experience in my life. I ask the board to please help us protect this long-standing Utah hunting tradition by restricting the non-residents to the 2 spring bear pursuit permits for the 3 premium units, require an ethics course for pursuit, and pass the division's proposed 16-dog limit. We'd like to stress that this is not a personal attack on non-residents. It's not a way to eliminate competition. We're simply just trying to protect our heritages. Utah sportsmen have fought hard for a long time to keep the hunting that we have. We cannot absorb all the hunters from the states that come that didn't fight for a pursuit season of their own. Utah's only one of 2 states that offer a spring pursuit season in the West, and Idaho being the other requires non-residents to draw an extremely limited hound pursuit permit, a hound handler permit to run any game in their state. We're still welcoming non-residents to come and hunt all of our other 20 spring bear units with an over-the-counter pursuit permit, as well as hunt the entire state for lions. With the 6 proposed limited spring pursuit tags, plus the 10 kill tags in the draw, that'd still give them a minimum opportunity of 16 chances to run on our 3 premium units. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. That's the last card I have. Is there anybody else with comment cards?
Thank you. Matt Farnsworth, I'm representing Utah Houndsman Association today. I'd like to thank Darren. He's went out of his way, the division as well, to include us in all of these conversations, and it really does mean a lot to us. I know I've emailed back and forth with several of you regarding our proposal, and just to reiterate that, what we'd like to see is the spring pursuit season to be unrestricted for residents. Status quo, as is. We feel that the 16 dog limit, the mandatory ethics course, and some education from us within our own ranks at our banquets, social media, stuff like that, will help solve the resident problem. As for the non-residents, just a little bit of history. We went down this same path with our summer pursuit season. In the bear meetings this year, there's a lot of talk about the non-residents bringing large groups of dogs, training dogs for the entire season, and being the cause of the problem. We don't want to totally eliminate non-residents, as Corey said, but we do want to preserve what we have. We recommend that we still allow a couple non-residents to come and pursue on those units. I think the draw is the only way that we could do that. So allow 2 tags for each of those 3 units. The non-residents will still be able to travel anywhere else in the state and pursue with an over-the-counter tag. Still allow that opportunity, no changes in the actual hunting aspect, strictly the pursuit. As for the bear numbers, I struggle with this one. I'm not gonna stand up here and say that predators don't eat deer, predators don't eat sheep. They do, that's a fact. What we have to go on is our management plan. I understand today a lot of talk about the management plan that's gonna be coming out next year. Awesome. When the management plan changes and comes out next year, we can start managing to that management plan. The management plan that we currently have in place says we need to work on a 3-year cycle. For those of you that are new on the board, this went through the RAC process, through the public process last year. It was voted on at the RAC, it was voted on at the Wildlife Board. The division wanted this 3-year cycle. We ask that you stick to that 3-year cycle. We understand emergencies are gonna pop up. Climatic change, extreme climatic event that was talked about earlier, that's been blamed for the cause of the deer. So we just ask that we understand that predators kill deer, kill sheep, we get it. But we ask that you stick to the science, the management plan that we have in place until a new management plan is implemented. During the bear discussion group, there was a lot of talk about distrust between houndsmen and the division, houndsmen and the Wildlife Board. And this, frankly, is a cause of a lot of that distrust. We had a 3-year promise last year that it looks like is going to be changing on us. Okay? So we ask you to stick to that 3-year plan. Did you guys have any questions for me? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sunday's Hunt. Following her will be Jay Ziegler, and following Mr. Ziegler will be Troy Justinson. And those are the only 3 cards I have left.
Good morning, Chairman Bateman and members of the board. My name is Sunday's Hunt, the Utah State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. On behalf of our supporters in Utah, I submit the following comments regarding the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources amendments to the black bear and cougar rule, as well as a proposal to extend Utah's wolf management plan for an additional 10 years. The HSUS supports DWR's efforts to increase an ethic of fair chase during black bear and cougar pursuits with hounds, as well as limit hound hunting of cougars and bears in the La Salle, San Juan, and Book Cliff units. Calling off hounds when an animal is exhausted and otherwise not capable of escaping is a basic example and principle that we believe every black bear and cougar hunter should abide. However, we believe a limit of 16 hounds is still exceedingly high and does not sufficiently increase fair chase for these iconic native animals. In order to ensure that all hounds remain under the control of their handlers, we believe no more than 8 hounds should be permitted for all black bears and cougar hunter seasons, aligning with the current limit of 8 hounds during restricted summer pursuits. Furthermore, we are opposed to the increase in bear baiting and spot and stalk permits. Bear baiting is counter to the notion of fair chase, and we are extremely concerned with the DWR's continued use of this practice. Baiting makes bears more vulnerable to hunters, ensuring an uneven playing field. Spoiled baits are nauseous, and toxic baits are fatal to bears, pets, and other wildlife. In addition to lacking fair chase, baiting bears can be highly problematic as baited bears become food conditioned and grow accustomed to human smells and food at bait sites, increasing conflicts. Bait sites draw a host of different species, which can create the potential for disease transmission. The DWR is proposing an additional 5 bear baiting permits and 30 spot and stalk permits in the plateau border until unit because of a declining mule deer population in the area. However, this targeting of black bears is misguided and unwarranted. In several recent studies that involved predator removals, those actions generally had absolutely no effect on mule deer herd numbers. That is because access to adequate nutrition is the key factor in mule deer dynamics, not predator elimination. Instead of killing more black bears, the DWR must address the primary cause of mule deer decline if they want to boost the population. While we support the DWR's efforts to promote fair chase hunting of black bears and cougars, the proposed amendments do not go nearly far enough. We believe the high level of trophy hunting of cougars and black bears permitted in Utah is not the best
Can you wrap it up real fast?
interest in Utah's wildlife, the habitats in which they live, and the majority public who care deeply about our state's cougars and black bears. Thank you.
Thank you. I did mislocate one card. Brian Perks, I do have your card. Do you want to come up now, Brian?
My name is Brian Perks. I am the executive director of a Utah nonprofit called Voices of Wildlife. In a Deseret News article in 2012, Dean Mitchell, the conservation outreach manager for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, said that, and I quote, "Each year, fewer and fewer people get out to take advantage of Utah's hunting opportunities and prime recreational fishing." He mentioned that in 1991, approximately 65% of the state's population participated in these activities, and by 2012, that number had dropped from 65% down to 39%. So let's consider this for a moment. That decline has still continued since 2012, but more telling is that the vast majority of that 39% participation rate is primarily deer and elk hunters. An incredibly low percentage of the Utah population participates in any kind of bear or cougar trophy hunting, and this number is continually declining. Interesting enough, and if we use those same years as metrics, in 1991, 35 bears were harvested in Utah. By 2012, the year of the article, that number had increased to 235. In 2018, the last year that we have, at least that I know of the data, that number is now up to 365 bears. So in a state where the vast majority of the citizens are opposed to trophy hunting our bears and our cougars for that matter, we ask, why is the Utah DWR continually pandering to the select few? Are you all sitting there with a straight face trying to tell us citizens that the bear and cougar populations have increased by almost 1,000%? The majority of us citizens in Utah want to see more bears and more cougars and more bobcats and all wildlife. Protecting and respecting their lives is just as important to us as the hunting traditions are to you. Darren DeBloois, your Mammals coordinator, who I found to be very good and a fair person, I have heard him say many times that one of the main goals of DWR is to provide maximum opportunity to the hunting community. So I ask, where is the maximum opportunity being given to us citizens who simply want to see these animals live, so that we can go out and take our photos or simply watching them live their amazing lives? Where is our maximum opportunity? Why are there not policies put specifically in place to address our concerns? Especially when we are the majority of the citizens in this state now. Especially when some of us from various conservation groups, I can speak for myself, are actively trying to communicate, to reach across the table, and to find mutually beneficial solutions and compromises. Both myself and our organization and our members respectfully disagree with the current bear hunt, and we disagree with bear baiting altogether. We would propose that both the bear and cougar plans be revisited this year or as soon as possible, so that a much more broad and fair plan could be implemented that better balances the concerns and wishes of all citizens, not just a select few. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Good morning. Troy Justinson, Sportsman, Fish, and Wildlife. We support the division's recommendations with the following exceptions. We don't support the restriction of the pursuit, but we do support the increased permits on the boulders. We'd also support what the houndsmen are talking about as far as finding a fair way to limit the non-residents in the state. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Troy. John Ziegler, are you still here?
Sure am. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming up.
Pleasure. I just wanted to say, I've been observing the wildlife management process for, 15, 20 years now. I appreciate Darren. I think he does his best to reach out to both the extreme elements of both sides, the non-consumptive and consumptive users, as well as what I consider myself to be someone in the middle. I understand the culture of hunting and houndsmen and all that, and I understand Margaret's from Hiram. Her comments were I thought, well stated, as was, I think, Brine, the gentleman who just spoke a moment ago. I especially appreciate Matt and Corey's comments about wanting to limit the out-of-state hunters and such. The point of all this, from my perspective, is that the majority of the citizens of Utah, as you guys all know, as Governor Herbert knows, and hopefully the next governor is fully aware, is that the majority of the citizens of Utah want a little kinder, somewhat gentler wildlife management plan in the state of Utah. We understand the hunting culture here. We understand the houndsmen and how deeply rooted that culture is, and I think that's wonderful. The concept of baiting animals, I think ethically you can certainly argue that that's something we should, as a society, put an end to. The ethics side of things, we got into a conversation with that over at the Central Utah RAC. I really appreciated Matt, Corey, and Darren bringing that up. I think as an entity, the Wildlife Board and the DWR really need to be the forefront of promoting an ethical hunting practice in the state of Utah. And don't be afraid to be an outspoken leader in that frontier, in that realm. For instance, the 3 elk that were just shot over in Round Valley, over in Summit County. Don't be afraid to come out and just denounce that as just a completely unethical and unacceptable practice. Again, I believe I represent the majority of the folks in Utah as somebody wanting to reach a middle ground from aggressive predator pursuit and a lack of concern for ethics versus a more gentle approach to our hunting practices. Forgive me for a little bit of a rambling message, but there was a lot of well-intentioned folks up here, and everyone had a reasonable thought. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Does the board have any questions from the comments that we just heard? Any clarifications? I have one clarification, Darren, and that's Mr. Binder brought up the 30 additional permits.
Yeah, we actually mentioned this when we brought these around. In the past, we've been inconsistent about how we handle conservation permits. Sometimes we were subtracting them after the board approved the total number of permits, and sometimes we weren't. So we're trying to be consistent there. And so when we brought this around last year, we did point out to the board that the permits you were voting for did not include conservation tags. And so that's a separate process that takes place at a separate time. And so those would be set. But when we bring permit recommendations around, and when we did it last time, that those permits would be going in the public draw and didn't include those. So that's I think the difference of what we're talking about.
Justin?
Justin Shannon, Chief of Wildlife. If I can add to that, after last year's confusion on that, we actually changed the conservation permit rule, R657-41, to spell that out. So in the future, this would be more clear that conservation permits would be allocated in a process that's separate than that of the public draw process that we do like in today's meeting. So, thanks.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. Any other comments from the board?
I would just make the comment, there was a comment made about not knowing of it in the past years, knowing of any complaints at all. Having between the Southeastern Region RAC and my time on the board, I've had an opportunity to be 13 years, and each year there's been quite a few complaints out of the Southeast region, and I can understand a lot of the other regions not hearing those, but to say that there's been 0 complaints would be, I think, uneducated and ignorant to the issues, because you could go to those units that primarily have this, and there is a lot of effects, and so I think that I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Darren, a question for you. The young lady mentioned harvesting collared animals. we're getting a lot of great data from this, and certainly it is harder to get collars on lions and bears. Is this a significant problem?
There's a couple of things that we did when we went into this study. First of all, one of the objectives of the study is to look at mortality of females, and so it is important to know what female lions are dying from. Having said that, it is incredibly frustrating to spend that amount of time and effort and money to put a collar on an animal and then have it turn up 2 weeks later in somebody's. So what we've done in the guidebook is request that people don't take collared animals, and right now most of those are going to be female lions. But we don't feel like we should make it illegal to do that. We don't want to put someone in a situation where, you know, when you're hunting with dogs, you should be able to see if it's got a collar on or not. So it's not illegal, but again, it is. I feel their pain. I understand how frustrating that can be, because these houndsmen, in most cases, are doing this on a voluntary basis, and they are putting their time and money into the effort, and it's frustrating for them. On the other side of the coin, you know, we're learning more and more about how lions are using the landscape and some of the things they're doing on those units, and some of these lions are eating sheep. They're eating sheep in the summer, and we didn't want to tie the hands of producers if they've got a lion that's taking sheep and it has a collar. This last summer we worked with producers. They worked really closely and great with us, and we kept a couple lions on the air to try to learn more about that aspect of things. And we committed going forward that we'd shift back to managing as we normally would with in terms of livestock and concerns that way. So I'm open to whatever the board would like to do, but that's kind of where we are on it.
Anybody else? At this point, we'll go into the summary of the motions from our racks. Start out with that Central Region, Northern Region, Southern Region, Southeast Region, and the Northeast Region. That's all 5 regions opposed the restricted pursuit season unanimously. The next one is the Central Region and the Southeast Region both voted on a mandatory bear orientation course, and we've heard a lot of comments on that today, and I think that's probably something that we should take when it gets down to voting, a serious look at implementing something like that if the board so desires. The next motions, Central Region, Northern Region, Southeast Region, well, all 5 racks, limit the number of dogs that can be used for pursuit or take a single bear lion to 16 statewide. That was unanimous. That was pretty much, well, that's exactly what the division recommended, and all 5 racks went along with that. The Northeast Region made a separate motion to add the 5 more tags to the Boulder unit. All the other racks did that when they approved the balance of their motions to accept that as presented by the division. The Houndsman Association had a motion for 2 non-resident spring pursuit permits on the following units, which are the Brook Cliffs, the LaSalle, and the San Juan. And that would go along with, you know, there's no restricted pursuit permits on all 5 regions in the state, and especially on those 3 to restrict the non-residents. Anybody else got any questions on that? Or if not, we'll turn that over to the board to vote on those motions that were approved through the RAC process. First one is the 5 regions opposed to restricted all non-residents.
I would like to have time for just a little bit of discussion. I, too, had the opportunity to serve on this committee to discuss some of the issues and concerns, and it was a great opportunity to be able to sit down with the houndsmen, other land managers, and to be able to hear all concerns and be able to hear everyone's voice. I would just say that those houndsman representatives on that were very professional. I think they had an uphill battle to be able to take those concerns and take them back statewide. That is, to be able to take that to every houndsman in the state is pretty tough. But I know that those on the group really heard those concerns and did their best to try to come up with a proposal that everyone would hear, that be able to get the education out there. I know they heard that and have done their best to do so. Through this process, I have been disappointed to see that there are many houndsmen that are not willing to make any change, that feel like there are still, to say that there are zero complaints or zero issues, I think is ignorant. I think that we need to do a better job of get that education out there so that this can be a long-lasting for everyone. It'd be a management tool that the division uses.
Any other comments? Let me clarify this again. This is that all 5 regions oppose a restricted pursuit permit for residents. So to keep it the way it is, what we'd be voting on for residents only.
And that's something a lot of the hound hunters that I talked to in southern Utah, they didn't think we had a problem, and they were very concerned to get overruled with policy. They thought that everything was working just fine for them. They didn't want the changes.
You know, representing the Northeast region, you know, and my personal issues too. You know, there's nothing that bothers me more than to go to a campsite or even on a trail and see a water bottle or see a campsite that's full of cans that's been burned or bottles have been burned that haven't been collected up. And it's not just the houndsmen, it's campers, it's just, you know, people in general that actually litter our public lands. You know, that's one of the things that bother me the most. But I do know that the Northeast region is real opposed to the restricted pursuit. And I've heard from quite a few non-residents that's opposed to it, and I understand that, but you know, we need to do something to help our folks that manage our public lands. And so I guess I could be supportive of the restricted pursuit tags for the non-residents. I don't think I can support it for the residents though. I like the 16 dog limit. That seems like a whole lot of dogs to me. But I have been on a few. I've seen a few lion hunts. I've never owned a tag, and it's. But I love dogs. I love to see dogs work, and that's one way to train them is when you're training this. So I could understand maybe a few more dogs on it. So I get behind the 16 dog limit, and I definitely can get behind the ethics course. So that's just my 2 cents.
I'd like to bring one more thing up. Today, though, I did see a lot of common ground between the public. In Sunday's comments, she recommended 8 dogs, and I think that from where the public has been in the past, or some individuals, I think that is a step in the right direction where people are trying to meet common ground. Sitting on that committee, I personally, having been in the Southeast region and knowing some of those conflicts, was closer to that 8 than the 16. But having sit on that committee and going through all of the issues, I will support what come out of that committee, which is the 16, because I think there was a lot of effort and time spent on what that would look like on the ground, and so I will stand by that. But I do appreciate those comments today that are trying to find that common ground to get everyone where they need to be, and I think the thing that we need to do is really look hard at if the 16 is implemented, is that enough? And if it's not, I think as houndsmen, the houndsman group really needs to look at that. And if it's closer to 8, then in the years to come, that should be a motion. But having been on that group and being the recommendation, I would stay at the 16 also.
Wade, go ahead.
We have three restrictions that are being proposed today. One with the restricted pursuit and the 16 dogs and restricting non-residents. And I wonder if we can't accomplish our goal, solve the problems that are being presented to us with perhaps two of the three. And we wouldn't have to go as far as to pass the restricted pursuit for residents if we couldn't accomplish our goal with the limit on dogs and non-residents.
Any other comments? They want to make a motion?
I can take a swing at that. The motion I'll put forward is to maintain the unlimited resident pursuit permits, limit the non-residents to two pursuit permits on the 3 premium units, unlimited on the others, and institute a 16-dog limit. Entire state.
Have a motion and a second.
I'll second it.
Brett seconded.
And just a clarification, so the 16 dog would be as presented by the DWR?
As presented, maintain the 8 in the summer pursuit, but the 16 during the take permits and the pursuit.
Questions on the motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. The motion is to do away with the restricted pursuit season for residents on those 3 units, keep it like it is. The balance of that motion is to go to the 16 dog limit statewide. All those in favor, I'll take a vote. And the 2 non-residents, excuse me, so just, yes. Okay. Brett, you have a question?
No, I'm voting.
Okay, all right. All those in favor, show by raising of hands. Unanimous?
Also make the motion that we institute an ethics course similar to the online course that you take when you're applying for a bear permit for the spring pursuit permit.
So currently to get a permit to harvest a bear, there's a mandatory course. That'd be easy to add an ethics portion to that. For pursuit over the counter, that causes problems. And I think Lindy's here. She may want to speak to that. It's probably doable, but it might affect how we can sell those permits, like at our vendors, and that's my understanding. So maybe she could clarify.
Hey, Lindy.
Hi. So it is doable. We can put the orientation to pursuit permits, but it will have issues with our vendors. But it will stop people from buying them, but it can be done. It's pretty easy to.
What I'd recommend is they just have to go online and do it, and then they can go to whichever vendor, bring their little
Well, in their
little number
field,
thing.
in the education field, in their profile, will just allow them to do it.
Still, even though it complicates things, I still think it's important enough to institute that program in this spring pursuit situation.
It would be for all pursuit permits. Yep.
I'll continue with that.
Thanks, Linda.
I believe that we institute an pursuit ethics course prior to being able to purchase a permit, whichever means you go through.
I've got a question with that. So is there an ethics course for the hunt that they do take?
No, currently there's an orientation. The focus of that is identifying between male and female bears and to try to encourage people to not take females or take fewer females. But there isn't a portion that talks about, using the mountain and sharing the mountain and things that you could do to jeopardize the sport. So those are the kinds of things I think we were talking about in terms of ethics, and we could add that.
I think that in that proposal it'd be important to add that to both. It's already existing, just adding some more to the ethics for the hunt portion also when they take that.
I'll amend that motion. Add ethics to the bear orientation class or online course and institute a pursuit ethics online course prior to purchasing a permit.
I'll second that.
Everybody clear on the motion? Staci?
Kevin?
Ready for a vote? All those in favor? Unanimous?
Can I take a stab at an idea, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Wade.
I apologize. I want to share some ideas first, and then I do have a motion at the end of this. One of the big complaints I have heard in the last 6, 8, 10 months about the division and about the Wildlife Board is that we are slow to react. We're slow to react when things come down the pipe. We have reasons why we can't dive right in and fix that and make those changes. It's been said several times here today, the dilemma we have with our deer herds in portions of the state. I think Carl said it best last month that mule deer are our primary, our premier, I think was the word he said, species in the state. That's our traditional, most popular wildlife. It's the one people care about. It's the one they want to see. It's the one they want to hunt. And Mother Nature has dealt us some severe blows with regard to these herds. But I think it's also peeled back an underlying problem that we've had. With this drought in the winter, I think it's shown that we've had some declining herds. We've had some problems in place. And as Darren mentioned in October, our bear lions we were talking about, but I think the same is true for our bear populations. They've almost tripled in the last 10 years. And I think that has been the underlying problem on a lot of our deer herds. When the deer are doing great, when conditions and habitat are allowing it, the deer are still doing okay. But when we have a few climatic blows, it's really causing us problems. And right now we're in a significant problem. So I apologize to those that were a part of these management plans. I do recognize that we've committed to follow a 3-year plan. There are good reasons. It's important that we have 3- and 5-year management plans and that we follow them so that we can see through the changes. But when we made these plans, when we agreed to these plans, we did not have the information we have right now. We have information and we have a clearer picture of where our deer are now. We have better data and science from our collar studies reflecting what lions and even bears are doing specifically to our deer herds. I struggle to see that we wouldn't be remiss in our obligation to manage deer if we didn't address bear right now. I hate to see us kick this down the road. I hate to see us be slow to react on this. We do have the ability today to make some changes that can affect our deer herd this year. And hopefully we can address lions as they come down the road. I do think it's important that we move. Certainly we're not trying to get rid of these populations. We're trying to manage the populations within themselves. We can't manage deer without talking about predators. It can't be done. And as we talk about potential increases or changes today, I want to share just a quick story, and I realize this is apples and oranges, but I think it bears my point. On the unit that I spend the most time on, we have tried to reduce elk numbers for the last decade. And we kept chipping away with these 5 and 10 and 15% increases on cow elk permits every year. We weren't even slowing growth. And I think that is often the case. When we give these little token social increases and decreases, it makes the people feel better, but it doesn't impact the wildlife. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have to have large increases and decreases if we're going to impact wildlife. We have finally got ahead of this elk herd on the unit where we've tried. And it's because we tripled the permits in the last 6 years. We finally have started to decrease the numbers. And I think we need to consider that. What changes are going to actually make a difference? And anyway, that's my rant. I appreciate you giving me a minute. My motion would be, Mr. Chairman, I move that we increase all bear permits on every unit in the state by 25%. And on the units where we have significant deer problems, that we increase the bear permit numbers as recommended by the division today by 50%. And those units would be Beaver, Boulder, Book Cliffs, Cache, and Chalk Creek. And I'm certainly open if some of the other board members feel like there's some other units that need to be added to that list.
I'd just like to do one thing first, Wade, is I'd like to have the division, and maybe we just have Brock come up and tell us how many collars we actually have out there, because I don't think the public really knows how many collars we have on bears, lions, deer, elk, and different animals. And I think what set this off or started this was a summary of the study that we're doing that we just got based on what mortality we're actually seeing. One in particular is the Book Cliffs that it shows almost 70% of the fawns were killed by bears and lions combined, and there was 5 unclassified. But we do have collars on bears. We do know that bears are, with these studies that we're doing now, we do know that bears are a problem, along with lions. Lions come first, bears are second, then the smaller predators, coyotes, and other things affecting our deer herds and stuff like that. Like Wade mentioned, that it's timely now, because if we don't do it now, we're a year behind the ball to make a change based on the information that we just received. That email went out last Friday. And I hope that, I know there's like 170 people that are on that email throughout the state that get that information, that all of you have had a chance to review that and look at it and analyze it. Like I say, that especially the Book Cliff stands out, and the cache, like I mentioned earlier, when the presentation we had on the cache, we had 0 fawns. And Kent's standing there waiting. I know he wants to talk to this, so Kent, go ahead and.
So I'll just speak on the ungulate side of things. I'll let Darren talk on the predator side. But for deer, we now have collars on, I believe, 20 units of the 30 across the state right now, where we're collecting data on survival, cause-specific mortality. Overall, this represents somewhere around, I think, I'll throw out 1,500. I don't know the exact number of collars, but we just had a significant effort from November through December. We captured, I believe, 940 some animals to assess their condition and add collars to them. So we're huge steps to get information on ungulates across the state on how they're doing. On each one of those collars, when they do trigger a mortality email, they'll send us, when they trigger mortality, they send us an email, we go out and we inspect that and we get cause-specific mortality. So we know what is killing these animals across the state and in each unit, and we can identify the limiting factors. Specific to the Book Cliff study, that's one where we're actually collaring neonates, and we also, so as soon as they're born, we get information and we go out and we collar that newborn, and we can understand when they're dying. And as you said, yeah, 70% were attributed to predators, roughly 30% in the bears, 30% lions, or about a third of each. So yeah, I mean, they're having an impact, I guess, is what it shows, is that predators do kill ungulates. That's what we know. And depending on where you're at in terms of population size and where you're at relative to carrying capacity determines how much they'll have an impact. As I mentioned earlier, the data show that we do have animals in good condition right now. They did decline significantly. And there isn't really any limitation on most units. There are a few in the state where we don't see a lot of impact or a lot of concerns right now due to nutrition. However, because we did, we grew a lot of deer quickly, and then the predator populations grew in accordance. And so since we dropped those ungulate populations, it seems like there's probably a imbalance of predators and prey right now. So there could be the potential for some top-down effects where these predators are keeping populations down. Specific to bears, we have not seen any mortality directly associated with adult animals and bears. However, there is some evidence where cougars are killing the adult, and then you'll see a bear actually push that cougar off the carcass, which could impact the amount of deer a cougar has to kill and make them kill more. Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much the ungulate side of things.
Well, that's the great information that we're getting from these collar studies that we're doing, and we've been doing them for several years in different places, and it's gives us something to go on now instead of, a lot of people have always assumed these things, what's going on out there, but now with the collars, we have a better understanding. We have the exact numbers of what's going on out there, and and we have had 3 bad winters in a row throughout the state in different parts. Drought, deep snows, cold weather, which all have an impact on our ungulate population. So like Wade mentioned, that we need to take a look at, what can we do now? If we're losing 70% of our fawns, which is our deer herd going forward, we're in trouble. We don't know what the percent is going to be on that 30% that's left, to grow into the population, and we don't have any idea what's going to happen next year. We haven't finished this winter yet. We have no idea what the total mortality will be, and when do you do your next collar updates on these animals that are collared?
Randy and I try to send that out every month. We work with Kent to get that put together, Kent and Covey, and the 4 of us send that out every month.
Yeah, we get that every month, but I mean, just like this big one we just did now, it can be fall again before we actually go out. And, we'll get the monthly data as to what's going on as for mortality throughout the year.
That's correct. So the book cliffs will be coming out probably today, like an update on what's on the book cliffs. We did a revision of that yesterday.
That's after the one that we received Friday.
Yeah, so this will be more specific about what's going on the book cliffs.
Can you, tell us what that is, or just you got the information?
I don't have that information. I'll let Brock talk on the specific book cliffs because I haven't seen that update yet. But just in terms of the next large update that you'll see, it'll be post-winter. Once we have an idea of what we saw coming out of winter, then that'll be the next large update. So in terms of this really large one, we'll do it. Basically, we do the end of year one, which you just saw. We'll do a post-winter one, and then we'll do probably like an August one. So every 3-4 months, we'll get one of those large-scale updates out, and then if there's specific ones through the graduate students that they put out, a little more frequently.
Because that's a great resource that we have with Brock and Randy to update us on those that we get. Then plus we get the other cougar studies and stuff that's going on throughout the year and stuff like that. I assume all the board members are getting that information on the email and stuff like that, on what's going on these studies and stuff. So what we're talking about, we're not doing it blindly. What we're looking at, like Wade mentioned, we have some problems out there. We know we need to address it. How much we need to address it, I really don't know what the numbers should be. But we're talking about bears primarily. That the only thing we can influence right now are bears, because the Cougar proclamation is already in place until July when we review that and redo that again. So.
Could I make a recommendation? Covey talked earlier about a review of our predator management policy. What that's designed to do is look at the deer data at the end of the season and make adjustments on units where we see top-down effects. We have time to do that with bear permits before next season, and so we could identify units where bears are a problem. And then we have strategies that will be part of that policy that would pull those units out of the management plan sideboards and reduce bear densities on those units to address concerns about deer numbers. We have time to do that. We plan on bringing that to the board in the spring, and then we could implement any changes that change in policy required before we do permits next year for bears.
Can you talk about what units those would be or how many units
That's kind of the step we're at right now, Kevin, is we're trying to formulate some triggers so that we could tell when a unit is experiencing top-down pressure. And then the next step would be to apply that across the state and see which units would be affected by that. But under predator management, those units would be removed from, they wouldn't be part of, we wouldn't manage them according to the plan. We'd be managing them for a reduction in densities.
Do you have a ballpark? Would it be in the lower end of the 5, or you're talking there's many units affected?
It's going to be those units with, with deer concern. I mean, the cache has a negligible bear population, so that's probably not one that would float to the top. But where there's a significant bear population, and we see triggers, and maybe Cantor Covey can talk about the ungulate triggers that we've been talking about. Again, this is a work in progress, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. But that's the overall intent is to identify units that need more control, and then pull them out of the management plan, and then target those predator populations to reduce the number so that those herds can recover more quickly.
So Darren, what I'm hearing you say is adjust those numbers for the spring of 2021 bear hunt, not 2020. What you're saying is it's too late to help these deer this year.
We could, again, the board can do what they want today.
Well, what I heard Wade was saying was these increases that he's talking about would go into effect this year. 2020,
right,
spring this year.
Predator management policy would affect recommendations beginning next spring.
But we're still a year out.
Right.
My sheep starved to death in a year.
Well, we have some information, like I was talking about earlier, that the book cliffs is the one that really stands out. We have 31% out of 48 neonate fawns alive right now. And I don't know if the update lowered that number, Brock, down more?
I think it's just slightly lower.
Slightly lower?
No difference in elk.
But we've gone down, so we're in the 29, probably somewhere percentile or something like that. But the causes of death on the Book Cliffs were 14 by cougars, 10 by bears, 2 by coyotes, 1 bobcat, and unknown predation was 5, with the starvation representing one of those, and that was in the email that which comes to 66.6% attributable to predation. If you add that 5 unknown in there, it bumps it up even more. We have some of these other units, 1 through 9. The cache is at 0 alive. The south slope is at 24%. Ochre Stansberry is 35. And I don't know if we got any bears on the Ochre Stansberry, but that would be attributable. Lions, Wasatch Manti is 39, and the South Manti is lumped with that. The Monroe is 58%, 11 to 19 alive. Book Cliffs, 11 of 18 alive, and that is Pine Valley is 53%, and the San Juan is 27%, 4 of 50. Book Cliffs, other one I just read would have been on the elk.
Yeah, one thing I just want to clarify here, Brian. So when we talk book cliffs, we're talking that 31% are currently alive, but that's from the 0 to 6 month period.
Right, neonates.
The other fawn, the neonate stuff. The other fawn stuff we see on most of our units, that's from 6 months to 18 months. And most of those were a result of the hard winter and malnutrition deaths over winter. Some were certainly coyotes, some were certainly lions, but just want to make sure that people understand when we're talking. We throw out the word fawn quite a bit, and sometimes we're referring to neonates, sometimes we're referring to actually 6 month plus, and I just want to make that clarification.
You give me the current population where we're at on the Book Cliffs. I'm pretty sure we've never been above 60%. Dax, can you give us that information?
while they're looking up, let me amend what I told Brett. Under predator management, we could begin immediately. So if the board passed a policy change and a unit was put into predator management, we could make adjustments to bear permits as soon as that went into effect. And I'd need to look at a calendar to see when that board meeting is and how that aligns with the spring season. But we could begin harvesting bears this year under predator management.
Just on the units that are
On the units that qualify for predator management plans. So I think that might help.
Will you restate your 25 and 50% and
Oh,
then?
just a minute, let Dax give us a.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so book cliffs, we have not run the numbers for this year yet, but as of last year, our deer population estimate was 5,500, which is the lowest it's been in at least the last 16 years worth that we looked at and wrote down.
That less than 50% of the objective?
The objective is 15,000.
We've never been there for as long as I've been doing this. If we
and
brought it back.
The 15,000 objective, looking back over the last 16 years worth of population estimates, our average population's been 7,500. So we've been at 50% of the objective for a really long time. That objective, it may not be realistic, it may not be attainable, but just for context, that's where we're at with the deer population right now.
Can I ask a question while Dax is up there, or no?
Well, I just got informed we lost our internet feed, so let's take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back and reconvene this. As soon as we get the internet back up, we'll continue with this conversation. Okay, we're going to start back where we left off. We have a motion from Mr. Wade Heaton. I'd ask Wade to reread that motion to us.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the motion was to increase recommended permit numbers by 25% on all units, with the exception of, in these units, there would be a 50% increase. Beaver, Boulder, Book Cliffs, Cache, and Chalk Creek. And let me add as well that I'm amenable to any amendments, and if that list needs to be shortened or added, I'm fine with that.
Sorry, it might be helpful for us if maybe we identified a threshold of lambda that Covey talked about, under which we'd implement the 50%, maybe 0.85 or something like that. I'll let the ungulate guys speak to that, but that.
I'd be fine with that.
Generate a list that way.
Okay.
I'll second it.
I think we need to have a discussion first. So, can you hold on that second?
Yeah, it's open.
Well, Mr. Chairman, maybe we do have a second so that we could have some discussion. But then if we accepted that requirement of the lambda, we need to have a specific percentage in there. And Darren, would it make sense that we knew exactly which units that encompassed now, or can we just go that on faith?
It's obviously up to the board, but that's a way that we could generate a list and identify units that are the most the ones that have the most.
Could you bring that slide back up?
Sure.
That lambda slide.
He's got that. I'll let him grab that.
So I can see it moving on the big screen, but not on this screen. Okay. Just as a so the lambda numbers are in red there. We can go down. Remember that they're representative units. We do not have collars on every single unit. But if you look at Book Cliffs, for example, that would have a lambda of 0.78. your error is 0.09 there, either way. Or you can see Oker Stansberry, as you can see, as you go down, we have that lambda for all units using their representative unit. Remember, and Brock just pointed this out, that this growth rate is largely due to climatic conditions, although I understand what the board is trying to accomplish here with this recommendation and the data from the book cliffs. But I can scroll down through the units if you'd like to see.
Just do that real fast. I think we need to know what the numbers are going to be. Got the breakdown on the 2550. I don't know if that's the right percentage or not, but numbers will help.
Can you go back up too as well, Colby, please?
Explain what that represents, Covey, the yellow and the red.
So the red is the one you're focused on right now, and that just means that you had a negative growth rate of 0.85 as compared to 1, so, or the population was reduced by 15%.
According to just some quick math, it looks like that would be if we used the number 0.85, that would be over a dozen units that would fall into that upper category.
Yes, however, some of those units don't have appreciable bear populations.
I do like the idea of using a specific requirement, a specific number, and then just let the units fall where they may. I think 0.85 gathers in all the units we had concerns over. I do have a great concern over the beaver unit, and it is at 0.85. And so even if we dropped the number to 0.82, I'd still like to include that beaver unit in there if we could.
So can you explain how many tags that will actually increase on a couple of these units? Like on the beaver unit, what would that actual increase be?
I'm sure Darren will let him.
I'll take a second, but I can figure that out. It's more complicated with multiple seasons, and so we'd have to figure out how, I guess I'd assume we just increase each season by 50%.
It can be a large number on our major units, just the spring season alone.
There are some units like the LaSalle's where we're currently having trouble finding places to put hunters, and we're seeing a decline in success. So as we raise tags, we harvested the same number of bears this year as we did last year, with a pretty significant increase in permits.
Just take that increase and split it through all the different hunts, Darren?
That'd be the easiest way, I think.
Yeah, because there's no sense not to do that on each individual hunt, but just do the total and then add those extras to those individual hunts.
So increase those permits again by half again on those units, and then so, but I'll pull up I don't have a chart unfortunately that I can display, but I could look at that if you have questions about specific units. So, beaver, currently there are 8 hound permits, residents, no non-residents, so that would increase by 4.
That would add 1 non-resident.
And that would add a non-resident permit there. Summer, same. Fall, 4 permits, so, another 2. That'd all be resident. And then there's the multi-season, there's a couple of multi-season permits, so another 1 permit there. And then on down, on something like the Book Cliffs, we actually got a fairly significant increase to the Book Cliffs last year, but so there's 35 resident permits in the spring and 4 non-residents currently. So again, half again that would be increased on those. So that's a couple of examples. Is that helpful? Okay.
Everybody clear what that would do to the numbers? Just questions? We have a motion?
I guess the question I would have is on the 25% units, what that looks like.
So I think maybe Darren could give us a couple of examples, but I think, even on these units where our deer are doing okay, we're still losing deer to bears. Our bear populations have gone up considerably. Even on some of these units where we've doubled our bear numbers in the last 3 years, we're not even slowing growth. We haven't even leveled off yet. And so to me, I do think it's important, even on those units, that we have that 25% across the board, just to take the first step to get ahead of it. No, I just referencing those units that would fall within that 25%. So if we went with the 0.85 parameter, everything above that would be at the 25% increase. Everything below that would be at the 50% increase. Now that's considerably different than my original motion. That adds several more units. And I would just ask the board, are we comfortable with that 0.85 number, or are we more comfortable just identifying the units we're concerned about?
I would be more comfortable with identifying the units that we actually are concerned with, instead of just going carte blanche across to every unit in the state, because we don't have a lot of problems with some of those units. So that's my personal feeling on that.
Would the board be comfortable with us generating that list, or is that a list the board would like to generate today? And what I'm thinking is we get with the regions and identify units that they see those concerns. And of course, it's easy either way. Something we'd have to do quick, obviously.
Staci, can you answer that? I mean, we need to act today, or can we postpone it to give the division a day or 2 days to come up with the answer? Do it by the end of the meeting today.
Mr. Chairman, I think maybe what Darren is suggesting is that we just give the division that authority to set that list, and we approve it at 50%, and they come up with the names of the units. And I'd be comfortable with that as long as, and I would assume that, these 5 or 6 units we're most concerned about would be on that list. I'm probably comfortable going that route.
We, as a board, we need to do it today to make the recommendation. And what Wade just said and what Darren offered is, I think that we should go along with that and give the division the authority to make those changes.
One thing I might add, and just Marty Bushman with the Attorney General's office, is the board has to make the decision what units, unless it's going to use some type of numerical value that would automatically establish it. But you can't, I don't believe, give the division just the discretion to pick what units. it wants to apply this new permit number calculation to. That would be something that the board needs to do in an open meeting and vote on. So if there's any delay today, in making that decision, either it'd have to be voted on while we're here today, or there'd have to be another board meeting held where that could happen.
Do we go ahead and stop this portion of the meeting right now and save that for after lunch? And we could go with the balance of the agenda and deal with those items and come back. Now give us time over lunch and the division time to put those numbers together so we can finalize that today.
Yeah.
If that's acceptable to everybody.
That would be, acceptable, at least from an open and public meeting standpoint, so.
It's your information, Marty. So I'll leave it up to the board what you guys want to do, so.
What I would say is I'm going to vote against this at this point. I just don't have enough information. And so I would say let's delay this, get some more information, cover the rest of our agenda, and come back to this.
That too.
Make that as a motion then.
I'll make the motion that we table the bear, this portion of the bear, because we have approved some, this portion of this until we cover the rest of the agenda and come back in the afternoon and address specific recommendations on bear tags.
Acceptable, Wade.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous? So we'll come back after lunchtime and continue with the bear calculations. So we'll go ahead and move to our next item on the agenda, which is the wolf management plan. Kimberly, Hersey.
Thank you very much for having me here today. As mentioned, my name is Kim Hersey, and I'm here to recommend an extension of Utah's wolf management plan. And to start with, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on where we are both legally and biologically with wolves in the state. Currently, only a small portion of Utah is delisted, and that's that portion east of I-84 and north of I-80. So outside of that area, wolves are still considered an endangered species by the federal government, and management falls to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Because our plan envisioned a statewide delisting, the state legislature passed the Utah Wolf Management Act in 2010, and that directed the Division of Wildlife to prevent the establishment of wolves in any delisted area of Utah until the entire state is delisted. And also, if there's a wolf that occurs outside of that delisted area where it's federally protected, we are to call the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and request that they remove any wolves that are found there. So you may have heard that wolves are currently proposed for delisting throughout the continental United States. We hope that this delisting comes through as early as this spring, but we also recognize that this has been proposed several times in the past, so we'll see how that goes. And again, Utah's plan does not fully take effect until wolves are delisted statewide. So biologically, the Division of Wildlife has confirmed about 15 to 20 individual wolves in Utah over the last 15 years. Of course, we get a lot more reports, but if it's a single wolf moving quickly through the state, it's pretty difficult to document. Almost all of those animals that we have been able to document have been in counties bordering Wyoming or Idaho, where they have established populations, although there have been some outside of that area. We have not documented any evidence of breeding activity to this point. So based on that, the wolf management plan was written by a diverse group of stakeholders and was initially passed by the Wildlife Board in 2005 for a 10-year period. Because we were still in that listed phase, there was an extension approved in 2015, and the plan has never fully gone into effect. So based on the current legal and biological status, we'd like to extend the current plan for an additional 10 years. So the purpose of the plan is to guide management from that period of time when we received that statewide delisting until the establishment of wolves in Utah. And that's defined as 2 breeding packs. Or until assumptions of the plan, those could be political, social, biological, or legal change. So if some of those assumptions were to change, the wolf working group can be reconvened at any point at the request of the division director. So during this interim period, any wolves that would be arriving in the state would be studied to determine where they're most likely to settle without conflicts. And there's provisions in the plan to deal with problem animals. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Questions from the RACs? RAC chairs, we're ready. Looks like Braden's getting ready, so we'll go ahead and start with him with what your RAC voted on.
Yeah, we made the motion to pass as presented, and it passed unanimously.
Southeast RAC, thank you, Chair. There was not much discussion, it's just approval, and it will pass unanimously in the Southeast.
We made the motion to pass as presented, passed unanimously.
Excuse me, in the northeastern region, there was a little bit of conversation, mostly just clarification and informational, and the division's proposal did pass unanimously.
In the northern RAC, the division's proposal passed. There was a vote. We had 8 for and 1 against it.
Know what that abstention was, Justin? Or
going
just, I know
through
you
my-
weren't there, but just.
I was just going through my notes. I can get that really quick, actually. I thought I could. Is Jim or Ben here that could maybe?
Ben's coming up.
All right. Yes, so one just said, I don't like the idea of having wolves here. I know we need a plan, but I don't want wolves. That was his reason
Excuse me.
against it.
Okay, I have 1 comment card. John Ziegler. Excuse me, just a.
Comment at this point. To be honest with you, it's not clear to me what the significance of delisting the wolf in the state of Utah signifies. It's you know, as a layperson, it seems that if you delist the wolves, then they're open to hunting and et cetera.
Well, this just deals with the management plan right now, John.
Yeah, no, I
It
understand
has-
that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
That's just to approve that management plan go forward, so.
It's not clear as to what the significance of.
Just want to make sure you got your.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, John. No other comments from the public? Go ahead and take a motion.
Byron, I'd like to make a motion that we accept that as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Donnie,
I'll second that.
second from Randy. All those in favor? Unanimous? Brings us up to item number 7, brine shrimp, COR, rule amendments. Marty Bushman.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Marty Bushman. I'm Assistant Attorney General with the state of Utah, and I'm here to present some proposed rule changes regarding the transfer of a brine shrimp certificate of registration. To give you just a little background, or not background, but just a quick synopsis of what the changes entail, is under current law, a brine shrimp certificate of registration can be transferred to another entity as long as it meets one of two criteria: that the entire harvest operation goes with that certificate of registration, or the harvest equipment goes with the certificate of registration. What we're going to propose here today is to add, because kind of the idea of the equipment side of this is that a certificate of registration can be transferred if it is done so with an assignable contract with another party that's going to do harvest operations for the entity with the COR. So in other words, the entity holding the COR has hired somebody to do their harvest operations through contract, and if they transfer the COR, that contract will go with it and take care of it, you know, with there. And let me give you, to kind of give you a little more background on why that's necessary. Hopefully it'll make a little more sense. So just brine shrimp harvest background is brine shrimp's unique to the Great Salt Lake. It's its own special species, Artemia franciscana. Commercial harvest of it began in the 1950s. The cysts, which is a sack of eggs, they're harvested, cleaned, dried, and processed, and then they can be rehydrated in salt water, and they'll actually hatch years later. And so it's kind of a unique type of process. And so what happens is they're processed, collected, processed, and then packaged, and then sold across the world to aquaculture facilities who could then rehydrate those eggs, hatch them, and the nauplii, or the small little larva brine shrimp, provide a very high protein food source for prawns and fish systems and so forth. And just kind of the magnitude of this process in the Great Salt Lake is that in 2018-2019 season, 33,444,500 pounds of raw product was harvested off the lake. Now, that's not the processed product. There's water that's taken out of it, and there's also a lot of sometimes debris that's in the catch or the collection of these cysts. The industry itself has undergone sub-evolution for quite a few years. Over 20 years, we have limited the number of certificates of registration on the Great Salt Lake to harvest brine shrimp to 79. At that time, we felt that's what was sustainable, and haven't had a lot to, reason to change that at any point since then. These CORs are renewable year after year. It's a $15,000 renewal fee, and then plus there's a royalty on all the product that's harvested as well that goes to the state, eventually makes its way back to the Endangered Species Mitigation Fund, which the division and the state can use. Back in 2005, those 79 CORs were divided among 24 different companies, and it was a very competitive process. A lot of people out there trying to get their share of the pie, if you will, on the lake before seasons closed. And because of that competition, and then worldwide competition as well, in 2006, the Great Salt Lake Brine Shrimp Cooperative was formed. And this, was formed, its primary purpose was to create economies of scale, reduce overhead costs. When you've got 24 different companies, each with their own airplanes that are spotting, each with their own harvest boats and speed boats and processing facilities, the ability to compete in an international market was much more difficult. And the co-op was formed to try to draw together groups that then would basically operate as a cooperative and to reduce much of their overhead costs that they had under the previous format. had to endure. So as it sits today, this cooperative harvests, it processes, and it markets for its members in behalf of them. And all companies with a COR currently are now members of the co-op, except Ocean Star International, which has 11 CORs, but the remaining 68 are inside the co-op and part of it. As I mentioned a little earlier, the laws that we have now allow the transfer of a brine shrimp certificate of registration if the brine shrimp harvest operation goes along with it, or if the harvesting equipment go along with it. Now, the idea of this is we didn't necessarily want to see CORs being bought and sold as a negotiable instrument, so to speak, on their own, and that we were trying to accommodate the needs of the industry that spent a lot of money with specialized equipment and need to get out or want to get out. They have an ability to do so. And at the time, those two criteria worked quite well, but with the cooperative coming on, it was kind of complicated. As it stands, the cooperative, for those companies in it, it owns the harvest equipment. It does the harvest operations for its members, and many of the members themselves don't own the equipment anymore. And so it's created a problem that if you have a company in the co-op, let's say, has 4 CORs and maybe 3 owners, and one of those owners wants to get out, the only way under the current law to get out of that, to transfer a COR, is either to sell the whole business entity along with everybody else's CORs, which they may not want to do yet, or to sell harvest equipment with it. And but as I mentioned earlier, most of these companies don't retain harvest equipment anymore. It's all held by the co-op and done for them. So what we did in trying to find a solution to this was simply try to define harvest equipment, which had never been defined, what it was, and to basically create 2 components to it. One would be the physical harvesting equipment that would ordinarily be required to effectively utilize a COR. That's been kind of a standard we've used in the past as what is harvesting equipment. And but what we added is another component to that harvest equipment, since it's now embodied in a contract with the co-op, if you will, is that if there is an assignable contract with an active remaining term of 5 years or more between the business entity possessing the valid COR under the rule and the one that is going to transfer, that assignment can go and it would allow the transfer of the COR. And in 2 conditions. One is the contract either deals with the entity holding the COR utilizing another entity's products, never renting or leasing, products. So if I have a COR and I don't own equipment myself, but maybe I rent it from somebody else, I don't own it. And so this would cover instances where I'm leasing or renting. And then the other criteria, which was the one most directly applicable to this, is that another entity actually performs the harvest activities in behalf of the COR holder. That either of those 2 things, if you have a 5-year remaining term on an assignable contract, that will count as equipment and allow the transfer of the COR. Just some of the approval criteria you'll see is if it's going to apply, the contract is assigned to the buyer in connection with the COR transfer. It has a remaining term of 5 or more years. And then part of that process, the divisioners have to receive some information, which includes a copy of the contract and evidence it will be assigned to the buyer, an affidavit signed by the contract entity providing harvesting equipment or services to the seller that verifies the contract has a remaining term of 5 or more years and that it will be assigned to the COR buyer. And that really wraps up the changes. There's a lot of discussion about it, but it's fairly straightforward. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Any questions from the board?
What's the reaction from the COR owners, and are they comfortable with this, or have they?
They're elated. You'll hear from a couple of them here, I think. This was something they came to us with, the problem, and we worked together with the cooperative and representatives of the industry to try to come together and finding a solution for this without having to amend statute. And I think you'll find that everybody's very supportive of this.
Any questions from the RAC chairs? And we'll go ahead and get the report from the RAC chairs. We'll start with you, Justin, this time.
In the northern RAC, we recommend that the Wildlife Board accept this brine strip COR as presented, and it was voted for unanimously.
In the northeastern region, we did vote unanimously to support the brine shrimp proposal.
Same in the central, accept the motion as presented, unanimous.
Sorry, southeast region approved that unanimously.
Southern region also approved unanimously to accept as presented.
I have one card here from Don Leonard. If you want to come up, and you've got 3 minutes to step over to this microphone over here, if you would, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I need to say anything based upon the what you've heard so far, but I wanted to go on the record officially. My name's Don Leonard. I'm the chairman of the Great Salt Lake Brine Shrimp Cooperative, which, as was noted, was formed in 2006 to try to allow us to more effectively compete against foreign producers of brine shrimp eggs who have notable advantages over our operations. Number one, they have much lower operating costs, lower labor costs, lower and in some instances no regulatory costs, and they're much closer to the major markets in Asia. So I'm here principally just to confirm that the local industry fully endorses the proposed changes that were developed by the Division of Wildlife Resources, approved unanimously by the RACs, and presented to you here today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for your service.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Marty. You did a good job, and so I'll entertain a motion.
The motion that we institute a mule deer cyst rehydration program in.
I second that.
No, I'll make the motion that we accept it as presented.
I'll second that as well.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get those, Staci? All those in favor? Unanimous? 12 minutes before lunch, go ahead and go with the prohibited species variance request. Staci's going to do that for us.
And I can do this in less than 2 minutes.
Well, you've got 12.
I don't need 12.
Okay.
I'm
an early
Staci
lunch.
Coons. Yeah, I love early lunch. I'm Staci Coons. I'm the Wildlife Board Coordinator, and I'm here to present the variance request for Mr. Elwood Longnecker for the personal growing of Pacific white-leg shrimp. Pacific white-leg shrimp is currently classified as prohibited in the state of Utah. That's why I'm here requesting board approval for his possession of it. The division does not have any concerns with his facility. It's completely enclosed, and he has found a certified disease-free source. So with that, we would recommend that you approve his request.
So he's just raising shrimp for his own personal
Right
consumption.
now, it's for his personal consumption. He'd like to do it commercially, and he'd need to work with the Department of Ag in order to make that happen. He is the third person in the past 4 years or so that's requested this specific species, and we have yet to see anybody grow one. So, but maybe
It's the
this
same
is
ones
it.
we get in the restaurants and stuff around town.
Yeah. Who doesn't want Utah desert shrimp? I don't know.
Questions from the board?
The same shrimp that they wanted to grow down in southern Utah that never happened.
Yeah, you've seen this request a couple of times. This is just a different gentleman who has a different dream to make it happen, and maybe he's the one.
Any other questions? Ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve that exception. I like shrimp.
Have a motion and a second. You got those? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, we'll close now for lunch, and then how much time is the division going to need to come up with the numbers for us to reconvene?
We're working on it now, so I would say 1 o'clock.
Okay, we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock then. All right, we're live. We're going to go back and continue the meeting that we stopped at just before lunchtime. So division, if you want to come forward and give us what you've been working on and found for us.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we took a couple of different scenarios, but we thought maybe we could start a discussion by looking at what the original motion was on increases. So we had 5 units that were mentioned. And so what we did is we took the 5 units that were listed, increased those current permit levels by 50%, and then a 25% increase across all the other units in the state. One exception here is the Plateau Boulder. If we did just 50% across, it would actually be less than the recommended spot and stock permits we recommended. So we'd want to stick with that and then make the increase across the other hunts. So that's why that's in yellow. So the first column there are the current permit numbers after the unit name. The second column would be the number of permits that would be increased based on the motion, and then the total permits on the right statewide. So under this scenario, we'd be looking at an additional 290 permits across the state, and you can see how those would shake out. One thing that we would recommend if we go this way is that the board approve the overall permit number and allow the division to put those permits into the various hunts. Some units we have concerns about crowding, like the LaSalle's. We probably don't want to throw all those into a spring hound hunt. We may want to put more of those into spot and stock. So, but we have a couple other scenarios, but this is essentially what the motion was.
Board have any questions? We're still
Maybe just comment, Mr. Chairman. After thinking about it and looking at this, it doesn't make sense to me to include the cash in that list of 5, simply because there's not a lot of bears. There's not a lot of bear permits there, obviously. And it does make sense what Darren is saying with regard to the Boulder. It would make sense that we go ahead with what is in yellow right there, as opposed to what it would have been with the other increase. And so that would just be some thoughts I had. We could make those potential changes.
Sorry, I just adjusted the cash based on that, so that's what it would look like with just the 25% increase on the cash rather than 50.
On the Plateau Boulder, wasn't it, the recommendation was 5 summer and 30
additional, right?
Additional.
Yeah, so it would have been 17 total summer and 50 total spot and stock in the fall.
have your original motion. It's still there. We haven't, you want to take that away now, then just come back?
That might be easier, Mr. Chairman, and the bulk of that, the substance of it is still the same. And I would suggest we just vote on that and see where it goes. If not, perhaps we can come up with some alternatives. So I would move that we withdraw my motion, original motion, and move that we approve what is listed on this table with the changes that have been made with the 4 units that are in the upper harvest, the 50% being the Beaver, well, it would end up being 3, Beaver, Book Cliffs, and Chalk Creek.
Got your motion? Have a second?
Second it.
Have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. In favor? Have 3 for and 3 against. Wow. I think I'll vote against the motion. We go back and review the numbers and, cut some of those down a little bit from what they are.
Darren, did I hear you had some other options?
Yeah, if the concerns about the total number of permits increase, there might be an option would be just to increase the units in green and the boulder, and then leave the rest as currently recommended. Another option might be simply to increase, I think that'd probably be the one that would be the least, to represent the least increase across the board.
Are there any other units that you might want to add to that, what Darren just said, the ones?
Darren, what's going on with the Monroe right there?
There aren't a lot of bears on the Monroe, and so I know that we've got some concerns with deer numbers. If it is a predator issue, it's probably not a bear issue.
Mr. Chairman, could I just make a comment as we move towards perhaps another motion and an alternative? Would just voice that I think it's important that we do something that'll make a difference, and something that I mean I think we're all kind of on the same page with the predator idea that we need to do some things to protect some of the other wildlife, the deer and elk and the moose, and I think it's important that we just do enough that it makes a difference.
Okay, I'd like to hear from those that voted against the original.
I'll just kick that off. I too feel like we need to do something. You're looking at the neonate survival study that has been completed this year. We know, like in the book cliffs, we've lost 69% of our fawns that were born this year to 97% predation. And so predation, we're losing, and I don't know that we don't have the studies to go any more than the cache but cache isn't quite that drastic. But as the book cliff says, I think we need to do something. And so I appreciate Wade, what he's doing here. I think, we need to do something. I just trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. I'm on board doing something. I'm just not sure what yet.
I was really hesitant when we went to the 3-year plan, because it does take some of these numbers away from us. And having this in front of us where we have the science and we can see is so helpful. Same with the mule deer plan. I think it's important that, we don't extend them so much that we lose that voice, especially when we have, like we had with our deer herds. This was unexpected, and we've got this study back, the neonate study, which really helps us. And so having these numbers where we can have it proven by science. But I was the same way. I was against it because I think we were targeting some units where the science wasn't showing that we needed to target. I think a motion that precisely targets where there needs to be some work done would be something that I would support.
For me, I'd probably the strongest supporter of the 3-year. Let's see what the data showed over 3 years, and it was just have your head in your sand if we didn't need to do something at this point. So the motion was just a little bit too aggressive for me.
Anybody interested in reducing the number?
I'll throw out an option. Any that on all of the bear units with 10 or less, we do nothing. They just progress through. On the beaver, both of the Book Cliff units and the Chalk Creek, we increase by 25%, and the other units we increase by 10%.
That's your motion, Carl? Have a second?
Maybe state that one again.
If some of these units like Monroe and those have very small numbers, I think we have small bear populations where I don't have the science to say the bears are the limiting factors on those. And so I'm saying, okay, I'm comfortable with leaving those tag numbers the same. On these units where we know that the bears, it's a top-down predator, the beaver, Book Cliff, both Book Cliffs, and Shock Creek, I believe we have information that bears are significantly impacting those, and I would go 25% increase. The other units, we don't know, it's kind of in the middle, so I would say let's increase those 10%.
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Yeah, one question for Darren for a sec. The green, is that a 25% increase or some of those 50% increases?
Right now.
So those numbers be
except for the
different?
cash, the ones you're looking at here are 50, so.
The green ones are 50, so actually, the motion is actually to reduce what's in the green there now.
Right, that's my understanding.
25%.
And we could do that real time if the board would like to see what those numbers are.
I think that's pretty easy to see what those numbers would be, Darren. It's up to the board though if they want to see what it is.
Does that motion leave the yellow one alone?
Yes.
Do we have any other questions on the motion? Clarification?
Just FYI, luckily Kent is competent. That'd be 136 additional permits, just FYI.
That's down from the 288. We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Question would be, today a lot of the discussion's been on the LaSalle and San Juan and those numbers, and that this would not address those. Is that correct?
We put 10% extra on there, so
Currently at 25, we cut them down to 10.
be 14 additional on the LaSalles and 14 additional on the San Juans.
Mr. Chairman, Darren asked if these increases on units like the LaSalles, where we've got some crowding issues, if those could be, the permit distribution could be determined by the division. Is that something you could entertain as part of your motion?
As in any tighter, or
So-
just to authorize them to do it?
Permit numbers would be the same. They could determine which of the hunts the permit increases went into. So instead of limited entry, might go into spot and stock.
I don't know the ins and outs, and I would defer to them in the motion to allow them to spread those hunters out among the available seasons.
So we need to amend the motion.
Just added that, if I get a second.
You got the second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions on the motion? Call for a vote. Passes unanimous. And that should be everything we have on schedule, isn't it, Staci? Myself.
I would make a motion that we accept the remainder of this rule.
I'll second that.
Just so we're crystal clear, we do need to make that adjustment to the rule that you saw, the red line, that summer pursuit has a limit of 8 dogs and restricted summer pursuit. I don't know if it wasn't included in the stuff you had, so.
So I would include that in my motion to include that red line item of those 8 dogs that in this motion.
I'd second that too.
I've got one other business issue, if I could.
And we still need to vote on this.
Oh, yeah, we need to vote on that.
Motion on the table.
Motion and a second. I'll call for a vote. Unanimous? Carl?
And just one other issue or one other topic. Last meeting, there were a long list of changes to the big game proclamation in a lot of areas, but specifically the turning back of permits. And so what I would ask of the division is to get that out as broadly through social media, if there's a way to do it on the application itself, just to recommend everybody to read the proclamation, because somebody's going to get caught this time. And so just pump that information out and advise everybody to read that proclamation. Lindy's coming up, so.
We agree with you, Carl. We are putting it on the big game application as a page that you have to sign off on, that you read it. It's in the guidebook. We are doing a Q&A. We're actually having a meeting tomorrow with our outreach section to put all that together to get out to the public, because we want everyone to be aware of this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Byron?
Go ahead. Any questions on the motion? Justin?
If I may, just a point of clarification on these bear permit increases. We do bear permit recommendations on a 3-year cycle, and we're 1 year into that 3-year cycle. With these increases, are those valid for the next 2 years? I'm not trying to muddy the water.
I said it a year ago that the hardest thing we're going to have to do is keep our fingers out of this. Yep. And Justin, we're not going to keep our fingers out of it. So they're good for this year, in my opinion.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. We just, from a licensing perspective, and as we get this information over.
Based with the technology we have and the information we're going on today, we're going to have the same information available to us next year. So I see us looking at it basically on a yearly basis to adjust these numbers either up or down based on what our mule deer population is doing, instead of just trying to go to a straight 3-year stretch.
Okay.
Just to be forward with you guys, that's my own personal idea is what we would do. The board can speak for themselves as to what they feel.
Okay.
I recommended we keep our fingers out of it last meeting, and who made the motion this meeting? So I'm sorry, it's going to happen every year.
Well, and that's part of the question is, part of the point of going on a 3-year recommendation cycle is there might be times where we don't have this meeting. And so what I'm hearing from the board is you would like us to have this meeting again next year with permit recommendations.
I would say we need to have this meeting every year until our deer populations get back up to where we feel confident that we have a thriving and growing deer population.
I was going to say the same thing. I feel, and I do feel bad. I do not disagree with our 3-year cycle or 5-year plans, but I feel like we're a little bit in emergency mode right now. And until we get where Byron described, I do think we're going to probably keep our fingers in this one, at least when it comes to predators.
So if we have this meeting again next year and there's no changes biologically and we come with the same permit recommendations, that's acceptable to the board? But if we see issues, we can tweak them as needed? Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions? Mike, go ahead.
Just 2 things I forgot to mention on my update. With Ben Nadolski being promoted to the Northern Region Supervisor, we've made Riley Peck our new legislative liaison. So Riley, wave your hand. He's the guy working at the Capitol this year. So, and then the last thing is a sad note. Many of you knew Jack Rensel, who was our regional supervisor for many years in the Northern Region. He passed away this weekend. Had a apparent heart attack. So condolences to the family there, but Jack was a great guy. And that's all I've got.
Congratulations, Riley. Be at the Capitol. So, business from the RAC or the boards that we haven't covered. Ask for a motion to adjourn.
I would make that motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. Unanimous. We're done. Thank you all for attending and all your information.